Ahead on DC News Now at 4, a spending bill that could put funding for DC public schools on the chopping block.
You cut us off, you're cutting off your future.
The demands from young protesters on Capitol Hill and whether their efforts could pay off. Also, first responders to the deadly DCA disaster look back on the horrific night as we learn about a new investigation into the airport's airspace.
Clouds continue to be stubborn out there today. We'll let you know if they could break up at all as we head into your Friday.
Then all eyes are on the sky tonight ahead of a potential lunar eclipse. How likely are we to see it? And later, talk about a painful mistake. Some doctors are seeing an uptick in hospital visits from people accidentally gluing their eyes shut. What's behind the disturbing trend?
You're watching the station covering all of the DMV. This is DC News Now.
We begin with a major update for fired federal workers. Thanks for joining us for DC News Now at 4. I'm Mark Hall, and Lisa Gale has the day off. A federal judge ordering the Trump administration to immediately reinstate thousands of fired employees across several agencies. Agencies impacted by the decision include the Department of Veterans Affairs, Agriculture, and Defense. The judge found the firings did not follow federal law. The White House has yet to respond to the ruling. Well, the ruling comes ahead of a possible government shutdown. Tomorrow night, Senate Democrats are saying they will not vote for the Republican-led stopgap spending bill, which would fund the government through September 30th. The measure includes a $6 billion increase in defense spending, additional border security funding, and about $13 billion in cuts to non-defense programs. The bill would also cut Washington, D.C.'s budget by $1 billion. As the deadline nears, D.C. leaders are asking the Senate to step in and remove the provision which would force D.C. to operate at 2024 spending levels. D.C. News Now's Marielle Carbone is on Capitol Hill. Marielle, are their efforts paying off?
Well, Mark, at the House level, no, where this is already passed. But now all of the attention is on the Senate, where we still wait for a vote. Now, today, the focus was really on the impacts to D.C. education. And today, D.C. students were on the front lines. For second grader John,
I really like reading graphic novels, like these books, Dragon Ball Z.
And fifth grader Magnolia.
I love how there's so many competitions like Battle of the Books.
The school is their safe space, but they're worried a spending bill to keep the government open will jeopardize that.
If you cut us off, you're cutting off your future.
Thursday, these families holding recess at the Senate Hart Building and advocating for the Senate to remove a provision in the stopgap spending bill that would require D.C. to immediately revert back to its 2024 budget. And that's despite already operating under its congressionally approved 2025 budget for 6 months now.
We have people out right now on every floor of every Senate office building talking to every single senator.
If the CR passes, D.C. will have to cut $1 billion from its budget. D.C. public and charter schools would see a nearly $400 million cut in funding.
I mean, the idea that halfway through the school year they just have to fire all these teachers is just abhorrent.
For parent Lindsay Jones-Renaud, the reality is unimaginable.
What worries me is that the first groups that would be cut would probably be like special ed teachers. I have 2 kids who are on an IEP.
When we tell them what's at stake, we have seen it shift their perspective.
Alex Dodds with Free DC is hopeful the work will pay off.
It's very hard to look, young kids in the face and tell them you're going to cut their school funding and feel good about that.
And it's important to remember that D.C.'s budget is funded by local tax dollars, not the federal dollars, so no savings to the federal government here. Mark, we know last night Maryland Senator Angela Alsobrooks did file an amendment that would allow D.C. to continue operating as it is. At this point, it's unclear when that will be considered. Reporting live from Capitol Hill, I'm Marielle Carbone, D.C. News Now.
All right, Marielle, thank you. Maryland's Attorney General is part of a coalition suing the Trump administration. The lawsuit in response to the dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. Anthony Brown and 20 attorneys general want the courts to intervene to stop the dismantling, and they say the administration's actions are illegal and unconstitutional. The Maryland Attorney General says it could lead to larger class sizes, a loss of critical resources, and fewer services for students with disabilities, among other things. A new development in Russia's war with Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that he agrees in principle to a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire. However, during a news conference in Moscow, he emphasized the terms are yet to be worked out. He also noted any truce should pave for a lasting peace. Putin said that more discussions are needed with the U.S. as well as President Trump, who offered guarded optimism about Putin's statement and reiterated that he stood ready to speak with him. All right, meteorologist Damon Matson joins us now with the first look at the forecast. Damon, we wrestled with gray skies earlier today.
Yes, we certainly did, Mark, and it's been a battle throughout the entire day. But for this little bit of time here, this late afternoon, early evening, we're starting to win that battle. Folks, the clouds, they have finally started to let go across the eastern 2/3 of the DMV. Look at how that is just shrinking across the I-270 corridor into the district. We still, unfortunately, do have some clouds in the sky, but everybody else really starting to see that sunshine break out across Virginia, up into northeastern Maryland, and in due time here within the next hour, we should catch a fair amount of sunshine just before the day is done. And thankfully enough, too, with those clouds starting to break up, we are seeing temperatures respond. It's going to be a little too late for us to make it back to the 60s, but at least DC has jumped back to 51 degrees, Manassas 52. Unfortunately, Leesburg up to Frederick along the South Mountain Corridor still chilly in the 40s, but look out to the west. That's where we had sun most of the day. It's in the 60s in Woodstock, Kaiser, Cumberland are typically cooler locations. We're the warmest here today across the mountains. So as we head throughout the next few hours, like I just mentioned, most of us will see at least a brief bit of that sunshine with some of that clear sky sticking around into the start of the night. But starting around 10 to 11 o'clock, easterly winds. They kick back up again, and we're going to see the next wave of clouds start to roll in tonight. So should we expect another gray start to the day on your Friday? And what's the latest with that storm system on the way for this weekend? We'll have those answers in your full forecast coming up here in just a bit.
Damon, thank you. 9 people are displaced after a high-rise apartment fire in White Oaks this afternoon. Montgomery County Fire and Rescue responded to the Enclave apartments on Oakleaf Drive. 2 apartments were impacted. 1 person was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. DC News Now spoke to one neighbor who lives nearby.
I just saw, the ambulance trucks and the firefighter trucks, and I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I saw a young lady when we crossed the street, and I noticed that there was a fire, so I'm hoping that everything is okay. I didn't actually, go intentionally over there, but I knew that something was going on.
It's unclear how the fire started. An investigation is underway. A key House committee is launching an investigation into the military airspace around Reagan National Airport. It is in response to January's mid-air collision between a passenger plane and an Army helicopter that killed 67 people. South Carolina Congressman William Timmons and Virginia Congressman Suhas Subramanian are leading the bipartisan effort. They sent a letter to the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth requesting a briefing on what the U.S. military is doing. Now, to avoid another crash, since the crash, there's been a temporary ban on helicopter flights near the runways while they're in use. Earlier this week, the NTSB held a news conference calling for the ban to be permanent, citing several close calls. And new today, for the very first time since the deadly mid-air collision near Reagan National in January, we're hearing from some of the first responders who braved the icy waters of the Potomac River that night. First responders from across the region showed up to answer the call, including the Prince George's County Police Department. DC News Now's Randy Bass is back at DCA this afternoon with more. Randy.
Yesterday, officers from the Prince George's County Marine Unit, Dive Unit, Underwater Recovery Team, along with their aviation unit, all recognized and awarded for their bravery and courage that evening. They even take a few moments to speak with us and recall what happened that very scary January night.
6 weeks after the crash, that horrific scene and those early phone calls still incredibly fresh in the mind of Deputy Chief Katina Gomez.
They're like, Chief, at this point, there's no survivors.
Prince George's County police officers were among the crews who quickly realized all 67 people on board that American Airlines jet and the Black Hawk helicopter had been killed in the crash. What followed, described as absolutely harrowing.
It's surreal. It doesn't feel real, if I may say that. I couldn't even imagine it. I can't even put it into words, honestly, the things that I saw. I just couldn't believe it myself. And
A rescue effort turned recovery operation in an icy, frozen Potomac River surrounded by swirls of jet fuel and fumes.
We never felt the cold. We never felt the wet. We never said very much to each other. We just got the job done.
And today, now a month and a half after the crash,
and I think we should recognize them. Can we recognize them?
honored by their department for their heroic actions.
Just ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and we call them heroes.
Heroes like Jeremy Jordan. His assignment, bringing those victims back to shore.
It was about 14 hours that we were out on the water. The events that we went through, it still lives in my mind every day.
Coping with very real, raw emotions, but Jordan says he's grateful through it all.
I think we're better people because of it, and we're just happy that we were able to bring closure to the families.
And the Prince George's County Police Department tells us it has also been offering mental health supports to its officers in the wake of that crash. At Reagan National Airport, I'm Randy Bass, DC News Now.
Special people, Randy Bass, thank you. A total lunar eclipse known as the blood moon is making a special appearance tonight into Friday morning, and it may be worth it to stay up late enough to watch the moon turn red-orange color, weather permitting, of course. DC News Now's Liberty Simmons is in Northwest this afternoon at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. And Liberty, how can you spot it?
Well, many folks here are very excited. Depending where you are tonight, you will get a chance to see the blood moon across the DMV. And the best part is you don't need any special equipment or glasses to see it. Astronomers are keeping their eyes to the skies in anticipation of a total lunar eclipse, also known as the blood moon.
It's definitely a treat. We are hoping for good weather.
A total lunar eclipse happens when the Earth is positioned between the moon and the sun. When stray bits of sunlight filter through the Earth's atmosphere, it illuminates the full moon red.
NASA likes to say on their website that you are seeing all the sunrises and all the sunsets on the Earth at the same time.
Now, the blood moon will be visible for about an hour starting at 2:26 a.m. Friday morning, and peak viewing will be close to 3 a.m. Dr. Woody Davis is the president of the Northern Virginia Astronomy Club, which is one of the largest in the country.
We have over 1,200 members, and we have members from across the scientific community, and so we do a lot of different things all the time across the area.
Many of his members will be staying up to catch the blood moon and hopes it inspires others to care more about space.
More and more people will go into space, and this is one way to start.
And if you miss the blood moon tonight, don't worry, you'll get another chance to see the blood moon in March of next year. For now, in Northwest DC, Liberty Simmons, DC News Now.